Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to continue a series looking at the top builds of the Scourge League so far. So this is fairly early in the league, 2.5 weeks in, and we're going to have a look at the builds that have been overperforming in the solo self-found game mode. So this is softcore solo self-found. Hardcore solo self-found ends up being quite a different beast because the barrier for success is so much higher that it basically squeezes out a lot of build diversity. So we'll look at the SSF softcore environment, and just a quick note on the methodology we'll be using. Here we're going to be using GGG's ladder. This is a list of the top 15,000 characters by XP, and it also contains the top 15,000 by delve depth. These two groups overlap a lot, and as a result they combine to give you an overview of the most successful build archetypes. Now the website POE.ninja scrapes this data and provides a useful storage place for it, where you can then check out how various builds are going. This is also available for other game modes, so you can look up hardcore, you can look up trade-enabled softcore, and you can look up hardcore solo self-found if you want. Now, harder game modes do sharply constrain what successful builds will look like. We'll start to see that when we compare how, compared to the higher build diversity of the Trade League, some of that starts to disappear here, and you will see in solo self-found that there's a larger number of champions at the expense of other melee ascendancies, simply because champions are better than the other ascendancies at the moment. There is a small percentage of people that will stuff around with their builds for a bit of a laugh, especially when they finish the league. That's pretty rare early on, but you will find just the odd person that will set up some absolutely ridiculous build, like trying to allocate Avatar of Fire on a build that's using Atzuri's Promise or something like that, just to mess with the numbers. But they tend to be a very small percentage of the player base, and as a result, the data from the ladder is actually pretty good. So let's start with Ascendancy spread, and you'll see here that there's not very much in the way of Ascendancy diversity this league. It's not that there's any individually hegemonic Ascendancies, but there's a lot of poor performers in solo self-found. So having a quick look here, you'll see that the top 4 Ascendancies make up a little bit more than 50% of the league meta. This is for the characters that are level 84 and above. And when you restrict further to higher levels, which we'll have a look at in a sec, you'll see that this effect will be even more pronounced. Additionally, the next 4 Ascendancies make up another sort of 30% or so of the meta, leaving only about 20% of the player base playing the last 11 Ascendancies, the 11 underperformers. So what's going on here? Partly this is due to solo self-found being a hard mode. There's a number of Ascendancies that scale better with gear than other Ascendancies do. So for example, a Saboteur is generally considered very, very easy to get early gear on, and as a result tends to be really popular early in solo self-found. And for that matter in this league, it's expected to remain there all along because the physical Trapper archetype is really good. Seismic Trap somehow managed not to get nerfed at the end of 3.15, and has gone from being a very strong build that not many people were playing to one of the most dominant builds of this league. Additionally, we've seen that as well as the Saboteur being really a good example of a build that scales well with easily acquired gear, you also have builds that scale well with very hard to acquire gear, and the Ascendant is the case in point here. The Ascendant scales extremely well with the ultra rare dual Unnatural Instinct, and there's a number of players that simply won't roll a Scion unless they get their hands on an Unnatural Instinct, which, whilst in a trade league it's achievable for anyone that does a little bit of efficient endgame play. You can save up and trade for an Unnatural Instinct reasonably easily. It's not trivial, but you can do it. In solo self-found, you're reliant upon having one drop, and it's one of the rarest items in the game, and so you probably won't see it. As a result, the Ascendant tends to underperform in solo self-found, and this league is no exception. But this league, there's another specific factor, and that is the Fortify changes. The Fortify changes simply made Champion the default choice for melee characters. What changes were made with Fortify was that Fortify was changed so that one hit is no longer necessarily enough in order to grant a full strength Fortify buff, but the Champion can spec into a full strength Fortify buff all the time. This has come alongside the rest of the defenses rework, so with the armor changes and the evasion changes, both of which made the Champion stronger and probably helped the Champion more than they helped other Ascendancies as well. And so this taken as an overall combination of changes has meant the Champion is extremely strong defensively and probably Juggernaut level defenses, while still having the solid offenses that the Champion's always had. And so it's the default choice if you're playing a melee character this league. And you'll see that, for instance, people that might prefer the playstyle of a Slayer will often start as a Slayer, then go, this isn't working, I'm respecing to champion, I'm following the Hordes. So really, I think that the Fortify changes, I like what GGG were trying to do with them, but I think they got them a little bit wrong in the numbers. And I think they should go back to the drawing boards so that we don't see another situation where the champion is the top Ascendancy in pretty much every game mode. Likewise, Raider just generally overperforms other similar Ascendancies, even though less so in solo self-found than trade, where the squishiness of the Raider can be a little bit of a problem. The Raider is just generally the best Ascendancy if you want to go fast while not being completely squishy. And so for that reason, the Raider is outperforming the Berserker in melee environments, and it's outperforming the Deadeye in ranged environments. Even though those other Ascendancies do have some unique strengths the Raider can't match, the Raider as an overall package is just more popular. What happens when we restrict even further though? Not looking at the top 15,000 or so players by XP, but if we look at the very top players. So there's 100 level 98 plus characters, 1,000 level 95 plus characters, and 5,000 level 91 plus characters. When you look at these, you'll see the patterns are pretty similar, but champions and saboteurs are even more prevalent in this smaller sample size. Now, if we look at people that have got some bossing experience, Thread of Hope is a relatively common drop from Cyrus, and a very, very good item that most players want to acquire in solo self-found. So equipping one in solo self-found is a sign you can beat tough bosses. Poisonous Concoction, Occultist, and Seismic Trap Saboteurs are among the top boss killers. As a result of this, you can see 24% of Thread of Hope users are Poisonous Concoction Occultists, and 20% of them are Seismic Trap Saboteurs. So it gives you a sense as to, of the people that can beat Cyrus, those are two of the dominant builds. Crown of the Inward Eye is also a common Cyrus drop, but it's less universal in appeal than Thread, because many players would prefer to have a rare helm. It's very popular on Inquisitors that are running Righteous Fire as their primary skill, and so you'll see that Righteous Fire Inquisitors are also a big percentage of the people that have killed Cyrus in this league. Later in the league, we'll be able to analyse Bottled Faith as well. Bottled Faith is the incredibly strong unique flask that drops solely from the Cortex and Maven's Invitation the Feared, but at the moment there's only 30 of them equipped characters in solo self-found in solo self-found softcore, and so we can't really say much about Cortex capable characters yet. Ditto for All's Uprising, which there are only 16 of equipped in the league. So check back later on these items. They'll be good markers for the very, very top builds, but at the moment, not enough people have them. And also one thing that's tricky with All's Uprising is that a lot of people will loot the wrong one. So for instance, someone might be wanting a Malevolence All's Uprising, and they might loot one, think, oh, fantastic, and then they identify it and it's actually one for Purity of Elements instead, which they weren't intending to use. So they may not end up using it even though they've looted it. So Defensive Aura popularity is the next thing I wanted to cover. Defensive Auras were buffed a lot this league. Discipline wasn't, but Determination and Grace were buffed to the moon. And they're all over the place, even in softcore environments. So of the people on the ladder, 46% use Grace. This is second only to Flame Dash amongst active skill gems. 40% use Determination, 7% use Discipline. And here you can see a chart that illustrates the combinations that people can use. So no auras is a little bit less than a quarter. No defensive auras, that is. Discipline only is a couple percent. Determination only is more than 25%. Determination and Discipline is a couple percent here. Grace only is the most popular choice with more than a third of the entire pie chart. Grace and Discipline is a few percent as well. And Grace and Determination is a popular choice. So Grace and Determination make up about 12% of the entire ladder. Using all three of them is just a couple of people. For other defensive setups that are not auras, we have Molten Shell is the dominant guard skill with 40% use. Immortal Core coming second at 20% and Steel Skin third at 17%. And Purity of Elements is popular this league at 17%, just as an early league way to mitigate elemental ailments and possibly also to fill in for resistances that are missing elsewhere. So next is the question of skills. And one thing that is healthy is that after we've taken about the top 12 or so skills, at least the other section is pretty big. That is a good sign, and that's something that GGG have been improving over the last few leagues. So if you were to have a look at running this same report for, say, 3.11 or 3.10, you would find that the other section would be very small. But this league, we have Toxic Rain is the top skill, with Exsanguinate/Seismic Trappers and Poisonous Concoction being second and third. We have Skeletons, Tornado Shot, we have Lightning Strike, Spectral Helix, Righteous Fire's doing really well, Bane, Cyclone as an attack skill, Vortex, Detonate Dead, and Essence Drain, all making up the top dozen or so. So in terms of things that are doing really well here, so it's important to say that in Solo Self-Found, there's less diversity than there is in a trade league. And this is because if you're playing a character that is really good at just general mapping clearing, but is terrible at bosses, in a trade league, you can say, you can just simply seek out help from other players to clear conquerors and things like that. Some of the milestone bosses along your progress, whereas in Solo Self-Found, that's not an option. You're forced to play solo, and that means that you can't just say, hey mate, can you give us a hand with my 3 Watchstone Baran? I can't beat it, and it's gating my access to tier 14 plus maps. You have to do that yourself. And this means that there's more of a concentration towards builds that have proven boss killing capability. So for this reason, Poisonous Concoction and Righteous Fire do much better in Solo Self-Found than they do in trade. For a once dominant archetype though, I think we want to point out something about minion builds. They're doing fine in Trade League, but they're really struggling in SSF this league. And I think that this points out a problem that GGG should pay attention to, and that is that minions appear to scale too much with rare items that you don't really have a pathway to getting in Solo Self-Found. And as a result, when you remove access to these items, and that's what Solo Self-Found does, it removes access to items, minion builds start to flounder here. So the only build that's doing even remotely well in terms of minions on Solo Self-Found is Skeletons, and they're just a couple of percentage points in the meta. They're not doing well in any true sense. Anyway, so that's an overview of the meta as it stands 2.5 weeks into the Scourge League. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. If you'd like to download the presentation here, then I will put it on my blog, sirgog.com, a link down in the description of the video below. Otherwise, may your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.